As a trauma therapist, you know what an unsafe consultation space feels like because you've been in one or maybe you're in one right now. You leave consultation feeling worse, not better, more guarded instead of more supported. And if that's been your experience, you're not the only one. A lot of trauma therapists are walking out of consultation spaces feeling like something was missing, or worse, feeling like the space itself was hurtful. Because there's a massive difference between a consultation space that just checks a box and one that actually makes you feel safe enough to bring the hard stuff. So today, I want to give you the language for what to look for. 12 green flags that tell you a consultation space is actually safe. And since we're trained to assess safety for our clients, we know how to look at a person's environment and ask, is this actually supporting them? But how often do we turn that lens on the spaces that we're relying on for our own support? Almost never. And I think that's partly because we don't always have language for what a good consultation space is supposed to feel like. We do know when something feels off. We know when we leave a group and our chest is tight or we feel smaller than when we walked in. But naming what's actually right, it takes a different kind of attention. So that's what today is all about. And before we get any further, if you don't know me yet, hi, I'm Jenny Hughes, trauma psychologist and founder of the Brave Trauma Therapist Collective, which is where we make sure that trauma therapists have something left for them at the end of each day. And real quick, I want to hear from you right now. Drop a comment and tell me, are you currently in a consultation space? And if you are, do you actually feel safe there? You can just type yes, no, or it's complicated. I just want to know where you're at, where you're starting from, okay? And as we go through these 12 green flags, keep a mental count of how many are showing up in your current space. Just start tagging your fingers with them, okay? Because we're going to come back to that number at the end. Also, if you're someone who's been looking for a consultation space that actually feels like what we're about to describe, the Brave Trauma Therapist Collective is where this kind of consultation really exists. And I'll tell you more at the end, but the link is already in the description if you just cannot wait to check it out. All right, let's get into it. The first 4 green flags are about the culture of this space. Not what's in the brochure on the website, not what the facilitator says about the group in a marketing email, but what it actually feels like when you show up. So, green flag number 1, vulnerability is modeled by the leader. This one is absolutely foundational. That's why it's the first one we're talking about. Because if the person running the group only ever shows up as the expert, always composed, always in the teaching seat, never sharing their own struggles, that sets a ceiling for everyone else in the room. Because if the leader doesn't go first, won't go there, nobody else is going to feel safe going second. When the facilitator is willing to say, God, I had a shitty week, or here's still something I'm working through in my own practice or in my own life, it changes the entire energy of the space. It tells everyone, you do not have to have it all figured out to belong here. And as we know from research by Brené Brown and others, vulnerability from the leader is not a weakness in the structure at all. It's what makes the structure trustworthy. Green flag number 2, there's no performance of expertise. And you know the energy I'm talking about. You bring a case, and instead of getting support, you get a room full of people one-upping each other with interventions, right? Someone maybe drops an obscure research citation. Somebody else subtly lets you know that they would have handled it differently. And while, of course, we want to know what other people would do in our situations, when these kinds of things happen one after another, suddenly this space that was supposed to be about support has turned into a competition for who's the most impressive clinician. A green flag is when that energy is just not there and people are genuinely curious. They're asking questions to better understand, not to showcase what they know. The group then feels collaborative and there's a shared humility that says, we are all learning here. And that is oftentimes way more valuable than any single person's expertise. Green flag number 3, Confidentiality feels real, not just stated. Almost every consultation group reads a confidentiality disclaimer when you join, right? That's baseline. We got to do it. We got to cover our bases. And that is not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about the felt sense of what you share in this room stays in this room. And you can feel the difference. When confidentiality is truly embedded in the culture, there's an ease to how people share. People bring real things. They don't sanitize their stories or leave out the parts that they're ashamed of, right? It makes me think of when I was in grad school and I had to record all my sessions. And I was so fortunate to have a supervisor and a supervision group who received me and who also protected that confidentiality. I knew they were not going to go and tell the other students when I brought something, when I really struggled, I fumbled, I didn't know. Okay. And that applies once we are licensed as well, because when confidentiality is just a formality, you can feel it. People are careful, filtered, strategic about what they share. And if you find yourself editing what you bring to consultation because you're not sure it's actually safe to say it, that's worth paying attention to, okay? Green flag number 4, support comes from the whole group, not just the facilitator. And this is a big one. In a lot of consultation spaces, the dynamic is that one person is at the front of the room, the virtual or in person, and everyone else is looking to that person for answers. In some situations, say you're working towards EMDR or brain spotting certification, that makes sense, right? You need to be able to have that person leading and guiding and answering those specific questions. However, in our less formal consultation spaces that we need and deserve to have as therapists throughout our careers, this can just end up being Q&A dressed up as consultation. And that problem is that it creates a hierarchy that limits how much support any one person can actually receive or give. And so a real green flag is when the whole group is active, when members are the ones offering perspectives, asking each other questions, sharing their own experiences in response to what someone else brought. The wisdom in the room is then distributed. The facilitator, yeah, they guide the space, absolutely, but they're not the only source of support. That is a fundamentally different experience. And honestly, some of the most powerful moments in consultation come from a peer saying, oh God, I have been right there, exactly where you're at. Okay, so those are the first 4. They're kind of like the culture green flags. Now, let's talk about what happens when someone actually brings the hard stuff into the room. Because culture is the foundation, right? But the real test of a consultation space is how it then holds the weight of our work. So green flag number 5 is that vicarious trauma is normalized, not pathologized. And if you've been around me for any amount of time, you'll know that this is probably the one I feel absolutely most strongly about. In fact, if you know what I always say about vicarious trauma, drop that in the comments. Okay, coming back to our green flag, I can get very excited about this. When a therapist names the impact of trauma work in a consultation group, when they say, this case is following me home, I'm having trouble sleeping, or I'm just so numb and checked out after sessions, it's really important to notice how the group responds. In a safe space, it's met with recognition. That makes sense. That's a normal response to the work you're doing. Spoiler alert, that's what I always say. In an unsafe space, it gets treated like a clinical problem. And suddenly the group is concerned about you in a way that does not feel supportive. Instead, it feels like judgment. Or maybe someone should suggest that you should talk to your own therapist. Never a bad thing, but the suggestion comes as if naming the impact of trauma work means you've crossed some line that you shouldn't have. Normalizing vicarious trauma doesn't mean ignoring it. It means holding it as what it is, a normal occupational reality for anyone doing deeply empathic work with people who have been hurt. Whew, okay, thank you for coming to my TED Talk. When a consultation space can do that, everything opens up. This brings us then to green flag number 6. The group holds complexity without rushing to fix. Therapists are fixers by training, right? We hear a problem and our brains start generating solutions. And sometimes in consultation, what someone brings doesn't need a solution. It just needs space. It needs others to be with it. It needs someone to say, that sounds really heavy, and then just be there, be with it. And so a green flag is when the group can tolerate that, when someone can bring something painful or confusing or unresolved, and the room doesn't scramble to make it better. There's a steadiness to how people sit with hard things. They don't rush past the emotion to get straight to the intervention. They let the person be in it, and they stay alongside them, co-regulating. That's a profound thing to experience, especially for people who spend their entire professional lives holding space for others, to finally be the one who's held. Green flag number 7, your humanity is treated as a clinical strength, not a liability. And this one runs deep. A lot of therapists have been trained, explicitly or implicitly, that being emotionally affected by the work is a problem. That if a client story stays with you, that's countertransference that you need to manage. But if you cry in a session or feel rage about what happened to someone, you're too close. And what that teaches is that your humanity, the very thing that allows you to connect with your dear clients, to feel with them, to build trust in the therapeutic relationship, is something to be suspicious of. A safe consultation space flips that. It says your emotional responsiveness is part of what makes you amazing and effective. And being affected doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And human is what your clients need you to be, all right? Whew, okay. These next 3 green flags are what you're allowed to bring, not just your best clinical thinking, but the real unpolished version of where you are on a given day in consultation, okay? So green flag number 8, you don't have to have your case perfectly prepared. I've talked to so many therapists who don't bring things to consultation, or they don't even attend because they feel like they need to have their thoughts all perfectly organized first. That they need to have a clear question. They need to present the case in a way that sounds competent and put together. And that pressure, it keeps people from bringing the stuff they actually need help with. Because the things we most need support around are usually the things that we can't fully articulate in a clean and perfect way. Because they're messy, they're half-formed. They sound like, I don't even know what I'm asking, but something about this case is getting to me. A safe consultation space welcomes that. You can show up mid-process, mid-confusion, mid-doubt, and the group meets you there instead of needing you to arrive all polished. Green flag number 9, you can say, I don't know, without losing credibility. This one sounds simple, but it's actually radical in professional spaces because most of us have been in environments where not knowing feels dangerous, where admitting uncertainty gets met with a look or a correction, or that subtle shift in the room where you can feel everyone recalibrating their opinion of you. In a safe consultation space, I don't know is treated as honesty. It's respected, it's welcomed, because it means you're being real instead of performing confidence that you don't actually feel. And when a whole group can hold I don't know without flinching, it creates room for actual learning, not the performative kind, the real kind, where people are genuinely working through things together. Green flag number 10, disagreement doesn't feel dangerous. People in consultation are going to see things differently. That's part of the value and the beauty. But in some spaces, disagreement carries risk. It becomes hierarchical. Someone with more experience pulls rank. Or it becomes personal. Someone feels attacked and the group gets real tense. A green flag is when people can hold different perspectives without it threatening anyone's sense of belonging. When someone can say, I actually see that differently. And the response is curiosity, not defensiveness. A healthy disagreement is a sign that people trust each other enough to be honest. When everyone in the room always agrees, that's not alignment. That's a group where people don't feel safe enough to push back. Okay, The last two green flags are really the litmus test here. Everything we've talked about builds to this point. So green flag number 11, there's space for the therapist, not just the case. Most consultation spaces are structured around the clinical question, right? What do I do with this client? What intervention should I try? How do I conceptualize this? And those are super important questions, but they're not the only ones that matter. Because behind every single case presentation is a human who's carrying that case, a human whose nervous system is affected, and a human who might be questioning themselves, doubting their competence, or quietly wondering how much longer they can keep doing this work. A safe consultation space asks about the therapist, not just the case. It checks in on how you're doing, carrying what you're carrying. It doesn't treat the clinician like a delivery mechanism for interventions. It treats you like that whole human being who's doing incredibly demanding and beautiful work and deserves to be asked, how are you in all of this? Okay, green flag number 12. You leave feeling less alone, not more alone. This is the fundamental test. And I really want you to sit with this one for a second, okay? Think about the last time you left a consultation space. What did you feel? Did you feel lighter, more grounded, like someone actually saw you? Or did you feel more guarded, more depleted, more alone than when you showed up? If it's that second one, that's information. And it doesn't mean you're too sensitive or too needy or asking for too much. It means the space isn't doing what it's supposed to. Consultation exists to make the weight of this work more bearable, not to add to it. And if you consistently leave feeling less alone, if you walk away and your nervous system is a little more settled, the thing you are carrying feels a little less heavy, that is a green flag worth protecting. So, how many did you count? How many fingers do you have up, right? Drop your number in the comments. I'm really curious. I want to know. And if your number is low, let me be honest with you. That's not uncommon. A lot of trauma therapists are in consultation spaces that check some of these boxes for sure, but not most of them. And some are in spaces that might not even check any. And some aren't in a consultation space at all because they haven't found one that felt worth the risk. And I get that. I have been there. But here's what I know. Knowing what to look for changes everything. Because once you have the language, you stop settling. You stop telling yourself, this is just how consultation is. You start trusting that the thing you were sensing, that something was maybe off, that something was missing, you start trusting that that was real, and you start looking for something different, better maybe. Or perhaps you start building it. Trauma therapists were never meant to do this work in isolation. And the spaces where we go for support should be spaces where we get to be fully human, not just clinical, not just competent, human. At the beginning of this video, I mentioned the Brave Trauma Therapist Collective. And the reason I mentioned it is because these 12 green flags, they're not hypothetical for us. They are what we built the space around. Every single one of these. No, we are not perfect, okay? But these are foundational tenets of how we approach consultation together on every single call. So if you're looking for consultation where you can show up as a whole ass human, be supported by the group, not just the facilitator, and leave feeling less alone, that's brave. The link to check us out and to join us is in the description. And if this video helped you, subscribe. I make videos like this one to help trauma therapists build careers that are actually sustainable. And if you know a colleague who needs to hear this, send it to them. Sometimes the most powerful thing that you can do for another therapist is give them language for what they've been feeling. I'll see you in the next one.